Okay, welcome everyone. This is seventh ongoing user group for headless development, and we have two guests here today. We have Ghodrat Ashournia. Please let me know if I name you right, and David Morrison for today. Ghodrat, I know it's very late time for you. It's past 1 a.m. already in Berlin. Is that where you live?
I'm not in Berlin, but I'm in Germany, so yeah, it's the same time.
I see. Thank you very much for joining us in such late time. So you will be presenting first, and the topic will be obviously about xmCloud. People in the community know you about producing lots of meaningful content for that flagship platform of Sitecore. And I personally learned a lot from your posts. Thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you.
So with that in mind, the stage is yours. You're welcome.
Today, before I start, I must say some of the stuff that I'm sharing is heavily opinionated. That means they are just my way of the thinking. So take them with a grain of the salt. And yeah, so I just wanted to get that out of the way. So about me, my name is Ghodrat Ashournia, as Martin mentioned. And yeah, the last year was the first time that I applied for the Sitecore MVP, and yeah, I was lucky enough to get it. That is my blog post. You can find me also on the LinkedIn or GitHub or Sitecore Slack. In Sitecore Slack, mostly I will be on the xmCloud channel. For the xmCloud, I wanna just mention I was one of the lucky developers that could start working with the xmCloud in the early access days. And yeah, I from my background, I started working with the .NET from I guess 2002, 2003, and since almost 10 years, I'm working with the Sitecore. So about the xmCloud, the first component that I wanna just go over is the experience edge. Probably most of the stuff that I'm mentioning here is just repeat for you, but yeah, it is really important for us to be aware of the experience edge limitation. The Sitecore has a documentation page, which I referenced in here. For example, when you have large medias like videos or PDFs that are over 50 megabytes, then you need to consider other solution like a content hub. If you need a rich search experience with the facettings, then you need to use a Sitecore search. I cannot stress enough that the experience edge is not a replacement for the Solar, or yeah, replacement for the search. You can do a search query, simple search queries, but that's it. In our project, we use Sitecore search, and we did a integration also over the Sitecore search with the SAP SuccessFactors using the web crawlers, and we also use the Sitecore search to index the assets from the content hub. The way that we did it was we created some hidden pages which were excluded from the Google search or search indexes, and we just crawled these pages periodically. Like on these pages, we added the PDFs or videos from the content hub, and using the web crawlers from the Sitecore search, we just crawled these pages and wrote these assets in the Sitecore search, which could be later we could find them. One more important thing that I can think of about the Experience Edge is you need to set the expectations from the customer side, especially if they worked with the Sitecore before, because the publishing is different in the Experience Edge, the amount of the time that you need for the publishing, and of course, how the publishing works, it needs to be clarified at the beginning of the project. You need to talk to the customer so they know what are they basically buying. With the how the publishing work, I mean, the Experience Edge is basically a snapshot, and you are coming to the places that you will have cases that you need to do a full site to publish, because the composition will happening before the publishing. That means if you have a partial for the footer and you have changed some text in the footer, then you need to do a full site to publish. That is how it is right now, but it may change with the new Sitecore publishing server, the new publishing methods. If the Sitecore decides to change the page composition, how it works, that means the page composition will happen on the edge, not before the publishing, then it may solve that issue. Yeah, the next thing about the xmCloud. We need to understand it is a SaaS product. For me, at the beginning of the project, it was a bit hard to understand the concept and basically do this mind shift, that is how to use the SaaS products. That means basically we need to avoid writing .NET code. You can also check other SaaS products like Okta. Okta is an authentication provider like Auth0. You cannot deploy a code to these products to change, for example, OpenID Connect flows or add something in there. You have the functionality that product brings. You need to have the same mindset also for the xmCloud. The issue is when you write your own code and put it in that product, this product has an automatic update, and every time that you want to deploy a new release, you will basically have no control on the base image of the xmCloud. Every time the latest image tag, which includes all of the hot fixes or the new features, will be included in your release. And that may break your functionality, your custom code, or in worst case, your custom code can affect that product. So yeah, we need to have this mindset, not only for the xmCloud. I will extend it also to the other parts like JSS to basically avoid changing and just extending the product. It doesn't include only the code, .NET code. It also includes the changes in the databases like the core DB, especially in the core DB, the other parts of the products like xmCloud app or Explorer or Sitecore pages, depending on this on that database. So changing in that database may affect the current release or future release of the product. it is the same about the overriding the existing items. You need to just avoid it. What I suggest to keep doing is using item as resources. I really love it. And it brings a separation between your items and what that product brings. You can use extension points like PowerShell. When you use the PowerShell again, you should avoid using the ribbon integration because ribbon integration will affect the core database. Just use a context menu. You can use the webhooks, you can use the GraphQL delivery or authoring. You can use the Sitecore Connect if you have a if you need an external integration, or you can use other products like Sitecore Search and Content Hub. Basically, the message here is the logic that we implemented before in the Sitecore should be shifted to the head application or basically the Next.js. There is one small exception in here, and that is about the configuration. You may you still need to do some configuration, the app config configuration, for example, when you want to configure the language fallback, or you need to configure the course if you are integrating the content up, but it is limited to that. The next topic is about the JSS upgrade. We discussed the xmCloud. As long as you don't do any changes, you won't have an issue with the xmCloud or the XM on-prem. I will try to apply my learning and the practices that I collected with the xmCloud also for the XM or XP projects. For the JSS, if we think about that, what makes the JSS upgrade hard? I'm pretty sure that everyone has done at least one upgrade, and it is a time-consuming process. I see 2 points in there. Either there are changes or breaking changes in the API, or we have overwritten some of the out-of-the-box stuffs from the JSS. That means either you did the changes, for example, in the Next.js config or in the in the SXA components that are coming with the JSS installation with the Next.js. Martin have done a lot of posts on LinkedIn how to handle some of these changes. For example, for the Next config, you can use a plugin and basically extend it instead of doing the changes directly in the Next.js. You can use middlewares if you need to change something during the rendering pipeline. And one point that remains is the SXA components. Like, for example, if you want to do some changes in the rich text box component that comes out of the box, or image component, and so on. I will continue on that topic in the next slides. What I want to achieve is when there is a new JSS version, I want to just do a npx create Sitecore JSS, create an empty JSS project, do a simple folder comparison between this new version and my current version, and either delete some data or just copy and overwrite the existing data. To achieve that, we need to do some preparation from beginning of the project. Okay, the next point is about the SXA scaffolding. The next few slides are about the SXA scaffolding and creation of the new websites. The xmCloud and SXA are basically providing an easy way to create the new sites or new site collection. When you want to create a new website, you have an option to choose the modules that you want to install for that site. The question that you need to ask at this point is, first, do you need all of that modules? And can you use that modules without doing any changes on that component, like a rendering or templates in the Sitecore or on the JSS implementation sites? If you need to do changes on those components, it is the best that at the beginning of the project, just duplicate this item, duplicates these modules, and use or just create your own modules. I mentioned I've started a new XM project. The first thing that I did was just duplicated these modules that I needed, and I turned off the out-of-the-box modules. I know in there I am breaking the things that I mentioned we shouldn't do. We shouldn't change out-of-the-box components, but I didn't find any other ways, and the benefits that I'm getting from that is worth it, because the only thing that would be changed is on the modules, where I just removed the checkbox enabled, so that out-of-the-box modules which is available later on during the site creation process is gone. I duplicated that module, and then I used the clone rendering in this example for example for the image component to create my modules. And here on the in this picture, you can see I named it picture instead of the image, which I come back to that in the next slide. And in the front-end sides, I created the new folder, customs, and I basically duplicated that image component, and I named it Acme Picture in here. The benefit is when we want to do a SXA upgrade, sorry, the JSS upgrade, I don't need to be worried about this component anymore. There are other ways. Some people just delete these components in the Next.js sites if they don't want to use it. But I will try just to avoid touching what is coming out of the box. Of course, the best case would be that the Sitecore gave us the choice. I mean, they have some choices when you use an npx create the JSS app. there are some questions, some steps that you can choose what to be installed. For example, you can choose if you want to install the SXA. If they can just add some extra steps in there that you can choose which one of these modules would be installed during the SXA, during the JSS installation, it would be really great. The next topic is about the naming convention. I really suggest to create some naming convention at the beginning of the project. And in the best case is that you just create some PowerShell modules that do the whole, that facilitate the module creation process. These are just some simple example. For example, the templates shouldn't have any spacing in their names. You can always use a display name. Prefix the template names and avoid having the same name for all of the templates, rendering parameters, and the renderings. The issues come later. For example, it was a bug at the early phases on the xmCloud. How this GraphQL schema generator works is if it finds an item, two items with the same name, it will add the ID of the items, as you can see in here, to end of that item name. The issue that we had was we had, for example, in this case, contact card template, and the name of the rendering parameters was also contact card, and the name of the rendering was also contact card. We had the three items with the same name. On some of the environment, that grid was added to the template, and in some other environment, that grid was added to the rendering or rendering parameters. So it wasn't consistent. That was a bug in this algorithm. So that could be one source of the bug. And the second part that I try to avoid having the same name for the different item is to have a cleaner GraphQL queries. You probably don't want to have something like this in your GraphQL queries. So it's important to have some naming convention. Feel free to apply it, but make it consistent during the project. We are familiar with how the modular scaffolding works in the SXA. One issue is you have a scaffolding for the modules. That means one of the benefits of the SXA is the content authors, or basically the customer, can easily create the new websites, and xmCloud also promote that. You can see they have created also this functionality on the xmCloud dashboard. That means using the dashboard, you can just create a new site with a few clicks. When you're creating the site, the issue is the site is empty. That means you are missing the partial designs, you are missing the page designs, or possibly page branches. To make it easier, you can have an extra module for that. the Sitecore out of the box has an example with the which is this basic site setup that you are seeing in here, and it will create, for example, the partial designs with a few sample pages for you. You can employ the same concept to create basically the starter kits for different websites. If the customer has, for example, corporate websites and few marketing websites with the different themes, different headers and footers, you can create some sets of modules, and later when they want to create the new websites, they can choose which one of these starter kits to use to create this website. And when the website is there, you basically just can start creating the contents. Few small thing in here. Module creation process is a bit hard. For example, you need to know which location you need to choose in here. And you need also to create the branch template for that. I think a few weeks ago, I published a new blog entry, and in there I added some PowerShell modules which make it quite easier to add these steps that you need to create the modules. When that module is installed, you can just right-click on the site setup and choose add partials, and it will set up the correct location for you, and it will create a template branch. For the partial, it's a bit trickier. What I do for the creating the partial is I set up these steps. Then in one of the websites, I will create that partials. I will edit it in the I will prepare it in the Sitecore pages. I replace the tokens, like the queries that you see on the right side. Then I will copy the raw value of the presentation details to this branch templates that is created in here. And yeah, that's it. It makes it quite easier. The next point is again about the scaffolding. That means when we create the new websites, we have we have installed the modules, and we use the starter kits to set up the partial designs or page designs or page branches. The next thing is the security. There are two ways to handle the security. Either it needs some manual steps afterwards, or you can extend the setup security modules that is coming from with the SXA. It's quite easy, and using that PowerShell script, you can after the site is created, you can easily set up the permission for the tenant or for the websites. I added some links in here, and in there I explained how you can extend the sites, the setup security scripts. Yeah, one more point that may cause some issue later is about the partial designs. When you use the partial designs, you need You just don't need to go crazy with them. Partial designs are quite useful. You can easily yeah, basically create the snippets for the headers or footer and use it for the whole website. There are few points that first you need to clarify for the customers, again, how the publishing works when you have a partial designs. The important point is about the personalization. When you have a partial designs, you cannot use the integrated personalization for the partial designs. You cannot change the data source because you cannot edit the partial designs. So that could be one of the points that may affect your decision if you want to use a partial designs for a specific case. If you cannot use the partial designs, the alternative is using the page branches. The benefits of the partial designs is when you update the partial designs, it will cascade down and the whole website will be updated, which is not the case with the page branches. Page branches has another use, but in such cases that you cannot use the partial designs, you can create page branches and do the templating in there. The benefit is the page branches doesn't have that issue with the personalization. The downside is when you use the page branches and later update the page branches, the existing pages will not be updated. So yeah, I just wanted to point out the personalization when you are using the partial designs. My next point is about the consistent editing experience. When you're creating the component, you have a few choices how to configure that component. You can use the rendering variants. You can use rendering parameters, or if it is just about the look and feel, you may use styles. Try to talk to your front-end developers and your UX designers at the beginning of the project and define how you want to create the components. What you need to avoid is the same functionality for some component is created using the variants, and for other components it will be you have used the rendering parameters or styles. It will be a confusing experience for the content authors. The second topic is about the organizing your toolbox. The toolbox that you have in the basically the components tab that you have in the Sitecore pages is based on the rendering folder structure in the content editor. You can see here, for example, in the under the media, I have a download and video, and you will see the same accordion in here with the same name, media. The download and video are there, and the image will come from the headless out of the box SXA. Try to organize them in the way that is easy for the customer to work with. Okay, the next one is a bit tricky. There are two limitations when you have when you are working with the GraphQL. The first one is about the workflow. How the Sitecore works is when you want to use the workflow and push the items or pages through the workflow will be applied to the components that are directly referenced in the presentation detail. If you have a components that have a complicated GraphQL query, for example, when you have a parent-child queries, and only the parent is directly referenced in the presentation detail of the component, then the Sitecore doesn't have a way to figure out how to handle the children of that component. So the Sitecore have a solution for that. They have created these scopes for the xmCloud on the workflow. And using the scope, basically, it is dependent also on your content structure. For example, if you have a tab component and all of the tabs are under this tab item, the main tab containers, that means you have a tab containers and the tab items will be under the tab items will be under the tab container, then you can use this functionality. That means it can move all of the children or all of the descendants with the parent item when the workflow is executed. So there is a solution for that, and it depends if you create the correct item hierarchy. The second issue is about the language fallback. When you have a complicated GraphQL query with the parent-child elements, then the Sitecore pages doesn't have a way to figure out there are the child elements. Here you see an example. I have some example in the English on the left side, and I change the language to another language, for example, to the German. The containers, where the fallback will work for the containers, you can see it here. It shows that the value is coming from the fallback, but the children will not be rendered because they don't have an item version, and the Sitecore has no way to handle it. I just want to mention it so you can you have it in mind when you are creating the complicated GraphQL queries with the parent-child. There is no easy solution for this. The only thing that I could do is just to create some script that go through the presentation details, parse all of the data sources, and create the new item version for the target language. I didn't find any way to handle that directly in the Sitecore pages. Okay, my next point is about two of the issues that you see often in the Sitecore is like, and yeah, one of them is about the query is too too complex, and the second one is about the payload is too large. Before you start tweaking the system settings, I mean, in the Sitecore to change the complexity, or on the JSS side to increase the payload, I really suggest you to take a moment, think about that query, and think about if you can optimize that query. Because when you change those settings, you are just covering that issue. You're not solving that issue. When the payload is too large, that means you have too much data. It will affect your static site generation. It will increase your build time, and it will affect the publishing, and later it will, of course, affect the performance of the live site, and it creates extra loads on the experience edge. So the best solution, if it is possible, is to try to optimize those queries. I personally always avoid to just do any changes in the out-of-the-box settings. There are few ways to handle that. For example, for the navigation, we had that issue, and I think we almost cut the payload to half of its size. Yeah, you can do it with the really easy, small steps. You can check your queries. If your query, for example, return a JSON values for that component, you need to ask a question. Do you need to edit that component? You don't need to edit the navigation in the Sitecore pages, so you don't need to return a JSON value. The value would be enough, and just changing the JSON value to value will cut that payload with a large margin. That's one way to do that. The second way is in the last few sessions, there were a lot of talk about the optimizing the queries. I would really suggest to check the YouTube channel from the Martin. There is a lot of good information in there. And one more possibility that you have is to offload this complexity to an external service. We refactored quite a few components to just use a Sitecore search to avoid this complexity or large payloads. If you have a search provider, you can push the contents to the search and build the component to use the Sitecore search. The next tip is about the front-end workflows. Yeah, it depends on how your front-end developers work. If they have a Windows machine, then you shouldn't have an issue. They can just use Docker. If the front-end developer have a Mac OS, it depends on your xmCloud licensing. We were lucky. Our customer had 6 instances in their license. We used 3 instances for the development, staging, and production, and we used the other 3 instances for the developers. So they could just connect to these instances and work with the xmCloud. The second option is use one instance and create the multiple sites with the multiple renderings. For example, here on the right side, you see I have a developer 1, 2, 4, and each of them has different renderings, and we use the ngrok as a proxy to connect to one of these developer instances. The other option is if you don't want to use the ngrok, you can use a GitHub Codespaces with the same solution in the right side with the multiple sites in the on the single instance. Of course, it is not ultimate solution, because when you have backend changes, like you need a different SXJ item, it would be tricky to coordinate the releases. Yeah, my last point here is do not invest any time in the experience editor. The official editor for the xmCloud is Sitecore Pages, and just work with that. Don't invest any time to optimize any stylings or anything for the experience editor. Yeah, a few topics here. First, about the deployment using the xmCloud deploy. Always use a promote. How you build your environment is when you have 3 instances. The first one is usually the development, the second one is staging or testing, and the last one is the production. Do not do a deployment directly to the other environment. Always do a deployment on the first environment and use the promote to the other to higher environment. When you use the promote, there won't be any build, and the same Docker image will be pushed to the other environment, so you will have the same code base on all of your environments. My colleagues have wrote 2 blog posts that may be interesting for you. The first one is about the content sync and the backups. Basically, what we did in there is we used the Sitecore serialization to pull the content periodically every 15 minutes from the production and commit it to the Git repository. And later, we could just deploy any version of the contents to the other environments. It was feasible for us because we had a content hub and we didn't have any media on the xmCloud. If you have a media in the xmCloud, you need to evaluate if that works for you. It was really useful, not only as a backup for the content, also when you had an issue on the production with some page or some component, you could just sync the production content with any other lower environment and connect to that environment and debug it. Yeah, the next one is about the cleaning up the item as resources and the automated publishing. For the item as resources, the resetting of the item is important because usually, especially on the lower environment like development or staging, the developers will change the renderings or templates or I don't know, whatever is in the serialization. The issue is with when you do an update on these items and deploy it, items will be read from the database and not from the IRR item that you have deployed, because the database has always the higher priority. So we created these tasks in the development, and also we have it periodically, the scheduled task for that, which just do a reset on these IRR items to prevent basically remove these items from the database to prevent the issues with the deployment. And yeah, the last thing is about module creation. I think I mentioned it in the few slides before. I provided some PowerShell modules. You need to create your own modules or take what I added in there and extend it. The importance of the module is, first, when you use this scripts to create the new modules, you will have a consistent naming convention. You can speed up your development. So I really highly suggest you to, at the beginning of the project, take the time, provide your, prepare your tooling for the development, and then start with the project. Depending on the requirement and amount of the redirects, you may want to avoid using the SXL redirects, and you may want to use the hosting provider, either Vercel or Netlify. I wrote the one page for the Sitecore Accelerate, and in there I explained how to handle redirects when you have, like, I don't know, 5,000 or 10,000 redirects. When you use the SXA redirects, the main issue is with every request, it will hit the experience edge to get the list of the redirects. Like, think about that. With every request, it needs to download few megabytes from the experience edge and then parse them and so on. So you need to handle in those cases, you need to handle the redirects on the client side. You can just put them in some JSON files. If the Vercel has a limit of, I forgot, 1,000 redirects, I guess. If you hit that limit, then you need to create your own middleware to handle it. And yeah, I guess that's it. As my last point is, I have 2 tools for handling the item as resources. One of them is the PowerShell module, which can be installed in the Sitecore. You can get the reporting or clean up the item as resources that are overwritten in the Sitecore. And the second one is the some small Windows app, which you can just load the IR item in there and do a 2- or 3-way comparison. And yeah, please check out the Sitecore Accelerate. There are also a lot of useful information in there, which yeah, for the different project phases from the beginning or later for the development. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was such a explosive amount of useful information. I learned plenty of things from your presentation, despite I'm very seasoned xmCloud developer. There are lots of things I would like to discuss, and before we move to the next speaker, probably we can do that. I will anyway let our attendees to go first with the questions, if anyone has the questions, before I go into that deeper discussion. So if either of you have, just jump on and ask.
Yeah, I had a question, and just about something you said about the xmCloud deployments. So I was wondering, like, if you don't do an xmCloud deployment, how long will the previous deployment kind of stay out there with the current, the last base image? Do they
You mean
force it?
you mean about the automated update that the Sitecore runs?
Yeah, just like if I do a deployment with my own code and I run the deployment into prod, how long, if I don't do a prod deployment for a couple months, would it automatically redeploy with the latest xmCloud base image? And I just wondered if by experience you knew about how long it would take to force that update or not.
Automated deployment will be done with from the Sitecore side. You don't have any control on it. The cases that they do the automated deployment is not often. You can check your xmCloud deploy app, and the Sitecore mark them with the automated deployment from Sitecore or something like that. It is not that often, maybe few times per year, 2 or 3 times per year, and it will happen when there is, for example, the Windows security hotfix for the base images, or really big issue like security from the security hotfix for the Sitecore that they need to apply as soon as possible. They try at least not to do any changes in the Sitecore functionality, so it shouldn't cause any issue for you.
But do they upgrade the base image of xmCloud? Or they upgrade the same version like a patch? That's the major question.
Yeah, I cannot answer that question.
My guess is that they keep the original version.
Yeah, I hope so.
We can ask them. We can invite them to the next session and ask them.
Yeah, I mean, there was this discussion about 1 month ago that Jason and also Richard was in the Slack discussion for this. I didn't follow up on that. But if you search this like that, you will see exactly the same point.
I want to agree with your point about the promotion, like promote environments. The only difference that I prefer to do that is, let's imagine a classical project with 3 environments. So the lowest will be automated developer environments. So that's where your develop, or whichever you call this, non-main, non-master branch deploys to. So that's automated. The middle environment is something like QA, test, whatever you call it. And this one is basically not automated, but we still want to deploy to that environment specific, I would say, tags from the code repository, which basically they're not always match what I have in dev. Dev may be a little bit later than what I want to deploy there. And that's more or less stable points where I want to do the QA, where I want to do some demo to customers and all the other things. Okay, then that environment, I'm okay to promote to prod if it's signed off. Ideally, there should be another environment in the middle, in between QA and prod, something called like preview environment. And that's basically a mimic of the prod, but not with the prod settings. So, like prod is production optimized, it has specific SLA and other bits. So that preview one should be kind of a mimic of the prod, just without production settings. So yeah, this is the right way for doing things, and for exact reason you explained. My question was about the media stuff. You said you had hidden pages and you drop the media on these pages for search purposes. So I'm wondering if there was any chance to get the search against the origin of these images. So if they are coming from Experience Edge or whichever source you do. Yeah. I think search works, Sitecore search should support that. Cavell definitely does.
Yeah, that was for the Content Hub integration. The customer wanted to add some of the assets to the xmCloud. The way that we did it was we created some of the hidden pages and told the customers to add the videos or the PDFs on these pages. And later we crawled these pages. There are, of course, other ways to do that, but it was easiest for us with the minimum development effort to just implement that. Just using the web crawlers.
I was just to find out the
pages.
motivation for doing that, and you explain.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So another thing I want to add is there's another limitation for Experience Edge other than you mentioned, and that's 80 calls per second. I think we discovered and discussed that on one of the previous sessions. So that is another motivator for you to reduce amount of calls to Experience Edge at a time. And that actually is very much important at the build time, because build time is when we do lots of calls to Edge at the same time simultaneously. So you may be willing to avoid that. So very good point on the front end but SDK update. That's really pain point. And here's what I do all the time. Unfortunately, they sometimes mess things upside down, and they move dependence models, whatever files they have. It's very good exercise anyway to do this upgrade to see what's new in the SDK, because let's say you see new middleware file coming out of the box, and you, okay, what is it for? And yeah, you have a good point about comparing it against the vanilla created, vanilla scaffolded thing. I do that at starter kit level. So sometimes when they upgrade their foundation hat, I compare the starter kit I have so far with the foundation hat and see what's new and what's left. But that in some way creates me some artifacts I already have, and I don't know, like it's more difficult to compare, unlike your example where you compare against vanilla stuff. Then interesting point about SXA components. I prefer not to remove them, but what I want to have is I'd like them to be grouped in a folder, at least at the SDK, at least at the Next.js level, because they are kind of all in the same place. I'd better isolate them in some folder, saying OOB as SXA components, and let them sit there and not to mess with my stuff. What else? Workflow. I heard things that if your page is not on a workflow, you sometimes may experience phantom publishings. And the only way to guarantee that not happens is to keep your items in a workflow. With that restrictions is you guarantee you prevent. But again, that's what I heard. It's not something I experienced.
That is correct. I just have it also from the Sitecore.
For the another thing for the front end is that helps you isolate your front end developers. Use Storybook, and we again discussed it quite a while ago at this user group. Why would you use Storybook? What are the benefits? And that allows you not just help your front end developers to develop in total isolation from the Sitecore, because you're mocking the context and everything coming from Experience Edge, but you also have a wonderful playground that you deploy to Vercel on its own. You can deploy it as a separate project and showcase to a customer. Like, you already build the components, and Storybook gives you a wonderful trump in your hand that you can just show and say, look what we're doing. Look how nice awesome it looks. Here are all the combinations, all the variants of your component. So customers do love that, especially non-technical people. And that's probably all my comments. My question was, if I want to create a preview environment that is a mimic of prod, I think in xmCloud, the only way to do that is just to have a separate environment, because previously what I would do with XPXM, I would have a publish and target. I would create a separate database, and like I would probably go with that. But here you have to create separate environment and separate per cell project. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that is correct. You can just speed it up. For example, for the contents, if you want to move the contents, this example that I mentioned for the backup and the sync items, you can just use that, because everything else is usually IRR item. And when you have the whole contents in the as a serialized items, then you just need to deploy to the xmCloud and let this sync run once at least, then you have almost the same instance.
I'm now
Excluding
doing the content migration exercise, and sadly, we don't have any control of the database with xmCloud at all. So we cannot even back up what is there. We cannot even back up environment, and there is no way to do that, as far as I know. Right, so that were my notes, comments. Once again, it was great presentation. I learned myself plenty of things. Thank you very much. If there are any other questions, any attendees, shout out. And since no one, I would like to invite David Morrison to the stage. We work together with David, and that's probably the biggest inventor in our company for lots of other things. And I very much enjoy David joining our starter kit workshop and shares all his experience so far. So today, David will share one of his POCs and explain. It will be purely Next.js stuff, not related to xmCloud, but at least what I've seen. But David, the stage is yours.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me here. My name is David Morrison. I'm a solutions architect at Proficient, and I've been here for, I don't know, maybe 2-3 years now. Ever since I started in Proficient, I've been working on kind of more modern headless solutions. I worked for, consultants and customers before that, and a little while at Sitecore directly. I think my first Sitecore version was like 6.0, so that's how far it goes back. The topic I chose today is kind of something that came into mind for a couple hypothetical customers that we were working on with Proficient, and hypothetical situations for customers. And we really got to the point where we had done like one big headless site already for the customer, and we were really thinking of like what's going to come next. So the first thing you do for your first headless project is you either clone the SXA, or sorry, the xmCloud kind of starter kit, or my first one was before xmCloud even existed, so we just kind of used the JSS apps and some of the other kind of repositories that had starter kits, and started with that. And that's basically you have your one backend and your one kind of front end server, and all was fine. You create all the components you need. That one site might or might not use Helix for organizing your packages, and organizing your components, but chances are you were just using kind of one Next.js web server basically for all your concerns for that whole site. And that was basically it. So, we had customers that had, other kind of larger, not Next.js, but larger node, ecosystems. So we had customers that were, mature enough to already have like, node service layers for other GraphQL services, right? And that was just one example. And, we could, we knew that when you get, when any Sitecore or not, not Sitecore, size customer gets to that certain size, you're going to want to start to break up that, break up that web server, or, break up the project structure. In the Helix days, it was very common to, just right click in Visual Studio, create a new project, give your, sometimes you had a Helix project template. Sometimes it was just a, blank C# assembly. And, you started to split up in the, in different different concerns into different projects. And that activity is a lot harder in the beginning of, headless. It's people, from a typical .NET experience are not used to just creating new, node projects all the time. And, the starter kit that Sitecore provides really, or even just the pure Next.js one really, kind of gets everybody started. And so, the idea really came about like, taking, separations of concerns and kind of wishing for the ability to split up, different types of components into different areas, into different projects. And that's really how, I got to this kind of, this idea. So, there's definitely a lot of benefits of what, multiple projects, could produce. If you've got the, even the first headless site that we built, was huge. It had, 60, 70 components. It had, very complex header and footers. It had, some very specialized forms. It had, forms that share lots of different things. It had, umpteen different pages that we created, for specific routes and, all kinds of, specific functionality, in one giant site. And, customers also, have the idea that, some brands have multiple sites that need to share components. So if you were to, create a header and footer for one headless site in the kind of default pattern, you can't really share that component code with another site, very easily without making that site, part of your existing Next.js project. And, some sites are going to be, wildly different, and, you don't really want to combine all your sites into one kind of, code base in all concerns. Some might share things, some might have, simple designs might have that overlap, but, any kind of, real component separation, just wouldn't be possible with a single web server. Setting up multiple projects, can also, improve the separation concerns across teams. So, if you have multiple teams working together on, a single thing, giving each team, discrete responsibilities, like, projects, across different projects becomes a lot easier. You can, review on a pull request, who's, changing files where, if they're, if different teams are all working on the same place. The other separation, it also allows you to kind of cater to multiple domains in a single repo. So if you have, site A.com, site B.com, site C.com, all of those, and they're all wildly different. The workspaces can really, bring a lot of advantages there. Also, if you don't change anything in certain web servers and websites, you also, have the opportunity to kind of skip those website deployments entirely. So if you, change a core component and, one of your sites doesn't use that component, then, you know, you don't really have to release to that site if it's not affected by the changes. So, you know, you can, you know, quickly separate, you know, quickly separate sites, you know, based on, you know, what you need to update pretty easily. And, you know, another example would be something like the cart. You know, you have a cart component, you know, a cart section of the site, and which touches your payment processor. You might never want to touch that thing once it's stable. Whereas you might have content releases and other kind of changes elsewhere. You know, a multiple project solution with Workspaces, you know, might really help out there. And, you know, lastly, you know, is, you know, you also might benefit from reducing and having more control over your bundle size. If you have a whole bunch of different sets of components, and, you know, different sites and different pages are using, you know, different sites are using different types of pages, then, you know, you have the ability to control that bundle size by influencing the components that are built on each site. And there's different ways to do that, but, you know, you can imagine component factories, you know, only being built with the components that you need for any given site. And if, you know, you don't need it, then it doesn't get imported, and it doesn't get added to your, you know, component factory. So Workspaces is still kind of a new way of thinking about things, especially for probably Sitecore developers. It's an advanced Node.js topic, and it's not just something that, you know, you can add in a, you know, a couple minutes. There's ways that Node and NPM works that works differently with Workspaces that you have to be kind of understanding. You know, you have to have some kind of understanding of. And, you know, the main one I try to point out to everyone is that once you start talking about Workspaces with Node.js, you have to understand that, you know, deep down it's using symbolic links. And, you know, if you're not aware on Windows, you know, symbolic links can be kind of tricky. We also ran into a new bug in Windows 11 where symbolic links from NPM do not, you know, work in mounted volumes in Node. And so I'll talk about this towards the end, just so everybody gets kind of a, you know, is more awareness of the issues. But, you know, you should really, like, once you start setting up Workspaces, you know, the very first thing you should do is kind of try to understand the symbolic links and how they work. And at a very minimum, just, you know, observe them and make sure you know, are kind of aware. You know, once everybody tries Workspaces for the first time, there is kind of an annoying error in Next.js. It took me half a day, but I safely, you know, I finally found out you can safely ignore the error. There's a Next.js telemetry module that kind of starts up for, you know, your workstation and your container every time you start up. And some function it uses deep down does not work on Workspaces. So it's unfortunate, but there's workarounds, and you can figure out ways to kind of silence that error. But that's kind of something that always pops up as the first question when you try it. Okay, so, you know, what is, you know, I put this diagram together to kind of illustrate, you know, how, you know, a kind of fully fleshed out workspace architecture might look like. You know, it looks a little bit more complex, but this is, you know, a good representation of all the kind of package dependencies, you know, for different sites. So on the red, just on the left right here in the red, we have just kind of some of the core popular Node.js packages. You have React, Next.js, and then, you know, typically we'll have a Sitecore with JSS, Next.js. In the center column is all of the kind of core packages that we're going to create. You know, we're going to have, the very first thing we'll do for convenience is kind of create a package for our TypeScript config. And I'll talk more about this later, but this is basically to standardize your TypeScript config across, you know, a larger solution structure, a larger workspace. In the first example, we'll create, you know, just a couple types of packages to share across all our sites. You know, it's pretty common to have you know, some core components like buttons and containers and, you know, flex boxes and whatever your kind of component structure is, you usually have like a common kind of more atomic, you know, set of components. And that's a good example here. You know, you might have a really large, you know, header and footer component, you know, kind of design. You know, some of them we've made are real complex. They can have, you know, 4 levels deep with flyouts and, you know, quite complicated structure. And, you know, not every site might necessarily use that same mega menu. You know, you might have a landing page site or a landing page section that just doesn't use the main menu, and you wouldn't want to import that into your project and take that dependency. So, you know, think of, you know, the custom navigation components as your first kind of like optional project. And then from there, you would just create, you know, all kinds of feature components and, you know, anything else specific. If you wanted to follow Helix, you know, it would be all your foundation and feature components. You know, another example is just, you know, you would have, you know, you could have some core components that go across your enterprise that, you know, don't really need any dependencies on Sitecore. So these might not have, you know, that tight coupling to Sitecore. It might just have a React reference, and, you know, any system downstream that uses React might use that. You know, some customers might buy all in with their, you know, common components also having JSS. So it's really up to you to decide where, you know, you design components with or without JSS. But everything we're talking about here should work with or without JSS. So on the right side is finally where you have, you know, multiple web servers, you know, as many as you want, basically, you know, referencing your core components. So for example, you know, my main front end, number one, you know, sitea.com, you know, I'm going to use the core components. I'm going to use the navigation components and, you know, have that full, you know, set of dependencies. Site 2, you know, might have the same dependencies. It might not. Then, you know, you might have sites that don't use Sitecore at all. You know, no problem. They can live just right next to the sites that do use Sitecore. So you know, it really, the only thing that matters is, you know, that Next.js site, you know, takes a dependency on either your core components or that use Next.js and Sitecore, or, you know, just uses JSS directly from that front end. So you might, you know, you might have, you know, sites with Sitecore, you might have sites without Sitecore. You know, the idea is that you can kind of mix and match. You might have, they might not all be necessarily web servers that serve HTML either. They might be, you know, API servers, or, you know, some API server that has no knowledge of Sitecore living right next to the, you know, the front end that has all the content. But basically anything you can think of on the number of web servers, you know, can be represented in the workspace. So, you know, I've got a demo solution to show in a minute. You know, I'm going to try and go through all of the major things that you need to do to set up Workspaces. The POC is kind of really in its early days. I don't have, you know, the ability to send it out really yet, but I am thinking of that and trying to get that process. But I'm hoping that, you know, all of the steps that we'll just go through kind of real quick, you know, it should be, you know, I'm hoping to break it down into the, you know, the real basics of what you could do on your own to kind of set up multiple, you know, set up a simple workspace solution. If we can get it out there to the public, you know, it will be great. You know, it'll just save you, you know, save everyone that time. But I'm hoping we can cover everything to kind of get you familiar with all the pieces so you could do it on your own. So, you know, the first thing you're going to do is set up your Workspaces project folder. So you're going to need like a clean folder, either inside or outside, you know, your main xmCloud repository. You know, I'm starting to really like having separate, you know, front end and back end repositories, because if I don't need to change the xmCloud, you know, C# code, there's no reason I should be, you know, even, you know, updating that, you know, project or, you know, working inside that same repo on a day-to-day basis. You know, I think, you know, as we get better at headless solutions, there'll be less and less, you know, kind of core C# code to xmCloud, and it makes a lot more sense that, you know, there's no reason to kind of change that backend repo at all. You know, obviously core items changes are still going to live close to xmCloud, but, you know, once you're in theory, once your kind of template and component structure kind of stabilizes, you know, that work would go down, and there's always going to be a resurgence of that as you create new components. But, you know, not every team is going to create new components every time. You know, they're going to build up a big site, and then it's going to kind of, you know, most of the changes will probably be on the front end side. At least that's what we hope. So the very first thing you're going to do is kind of set up your Workspaces project. And, you know, it's a lot easier if you start from the beginning, kind of organizing your projects to understand which one does. And so in the example over here on the right side, I've got, you know, I've separated my my solution into both packages, my core components, you know, anything like a library in the historical sense, and then I've got a site for websites. There's no reason you can't have all your, you know, websites and core components intermingled if you're organized like that. I just, you know, thought, you know, if you're setting something from the very beginning, you might as well organize, you know, what you count as a library and what you core as a website. You might have different naming structures. It might be, you know, something more like a Helix structure where you have, you know, projects as your websites, or, you know, any kind of variation. But the idea is just, you know, set your basic folder structure and start to organize it, you know, the best you can. The important part to note is that there's, you know, package.json files for each one of the kind of packages that we're going to create, and then there's a package JSON at the root. And so, you know, it's really kind of important not to mix the other types of projects you might be working on in your Workspaces root. So like if you have, you know, C# projects, if you go with the Monorepo with xmCloud and you've got C# code and Node code interspersed, you know, I really wouldn't recommend like combining, you know, mixed types in your Workspaces root, because, you know, we might want to, you know, mount this folder later in a Docker Compose, or sorry, in a Docker Compose volume or something. And it wouldn't make any sense to like mount, you know, larger, you know, higher directories, like the root of your web server, sorry, the root of your, you know, mixed repo in a container. So if you create, you know, a new folder in your solution to start your Workspaces root, and then everything else is underneath there, you know, it'll be real easy to mount, you know, wherever relative that folder is inside your container. So that's something I would definitely recommend starting from the beginning. So, you know, inside that root workspace package that we're going to create, you know, the main the main driver of that experience when you're working with Workspaces is the Workspaces section of that file. So I put an example over here to look at, you know, so you define the workspaces that are part of that root package and all the different folders where you can find the different packages. There is a shorthand notation for wildcards. So you might see in some solutions where it says, you know, packages, and then it has 2 asterisks instead of, you know, 2 asterisks instead of, you know, listing all these packages here. But I just, for, you know, introductory purposes, I think it's nice to see that, you know, here's all the folders, and, you know, I know exactly which folders I'm pulling into my workspace. The only dependency on this kind of workspace root is should be something like npm run all. You might use other kind of, you know, workspace tools that would go here, you know, as you evolve your solution. But from the beginning, like, we'll start with just a very basic, you know, Workspaces root with just the one dependency on npm run all, and then all my sub workspaces, sorry, all my workspace projects, you know, including the core libraries and the packages, will, you know, they'll define all their dependencies, you know, at the leaf level. So the one thing that I want to point out is like when you're referencing workspaces in your, your root package JSON, it's best to understand like the folder structure. So you can see I'm using like packages here, / and then core components is the name of the folder under that. When you're referencing, workspaces within Node later with all your command line tools, I recommend switching to the package name. So instead of, using, the folder name when you're calling npm directly to target a specific workspace, you want to use the fully qualified name. Node lets you use both, but it's a lot easier from a folder perspective it's a lot easier from a CLI perspective if you're always targeting the package name, because you might have packages 2 or 3 levels deep, and you don't want to have like different, if you move projects around, you don't want to necessarily have to have that hard dependency on the path of the folder. It's a pretty powerful trick that you can use the package name of all your individual packages to target the workspace, and then you don't need to know like what relative path to the workspace to call. And this is just an example of the npm run command here. Let's see. So I mentioned before that an optional step, and I kind of really recommend it, but it's not something you have to do. The idea is to create, when we're setting on the course of creating multiple Node.js packages, it's a lot easier if you share your TypeScript compiler configuration across all of the different packages. So you shouldn't, you want to control that pretty tightly so that you don't end up with, variations and different projects using different configuration and creating problems down the road. So, from the kind of the basic setup we've set up, the basic kind of package and web server setup, we've got a really common set of core TypeScript config. So that would be like the base JSON that is shared by all projects. And then I have an additional TypeScript config for all the React libraries, and then an additional Next.js specific config, so that all your Next.js servers can share config. And then you can always override parameters for the compiler at the project basis, but you don't want to do that as much, and unless you really have to, just so you can maintain consistency across your workspaces. I put an example here of how you would extend one of the create multiple templates here by extending the config, and this extends is the same way for all your sub projects too. I'll show this in the code in just a little bit more detail. So once you have like the workspace together, you need to like tell the workspaces how to start. And it's very possible to kind of skip this step, but I wouldn't recommend it. You want to have your workspaces as that convenience layer. Sorry, you want to have that root project as the convenience layer into your workspaces. And you don't want people to have to remember, oh, I need to start workspace A, B, and C, right? The root is really designed to do that for you. And I mentioned the root really only needs one dependency, and we'll use it quite heavily, and that's npm run all. So npm run all provides both the ability to run packages in series and parallel. Run tasks from different packages in series and parallel. So like when we're starting up multiple web servers, in your head, that makes sense that you're going to be starting multiple sites in parallel. So we just, for example, this one command down here, npm run all, I'm going to start all of my web servers in parallel. And then when I start to think about the individual web servers, that's where I reach the workspace. So what I'm going to use is the -w command to the npm run, and that'll allow me to target the task from a specific workspace. It's a little verbose. I like showing everyone this way. You know, once you kind of understand the basics of the workspace, you know, you might very quickly graduate to something like, you know, an advanced package manager or something like an advanced build tool like Turbo. You know, the same thing that I've done here could be done with, and I have done with Turbo before, and there's all kinds of other alternatives you can have out there that kind of, you know, optimize your dependency graph. I would recommend everyone kind of understand the basics first, because otherwise it's really kind of hard to understand what those build tools are trying to do. So once you graduate to that level, I would say recommend it, but I think everyone should, you know, kind of understand the basics first, you know, also. I'll show these a little bit more when we start to run. So the one thing I wanted to really call out is that, you know, the Sitecore, or sorry, the Next.js provides, you know, a kind of a hot reload mode out of the box. And we want to do the same thing for our core components. So we're going to use a special flag on the TypeScript compiler for all our core components in order to watch for changes. That's kind of the one big thing that you know, you have to add to your own projects in order to maintain that kind of hot reload. So we'll set up that TypeScript watcher for all of the core libraries in order to provide the best developer experience. It doesn't really impact your, you know, your production builds, but it's really nice to have there, because, you know, chances are you're going to be working on a core component that can update, you know, across different sites. Okay, so then, like, once you have your you know, your core solution kind of structure, you'll have to start creating your individual component libraries. So I forgot to copy the code in here, but, you know, basically for every core component, you're going to create a new node package. And the one thing I would really recommend that took me a little time to understand is you really want to start to add a scope to your package names. It's better to, like, you know, pick your customer, or if you're really like a consultant, you know, creating core components to share, you know, you would use that, you know, company name there. You know, that scope makes it really easier to understand, like, who you're addressing in the workspace. It also kind of organizes everything kind of nicely when you look at your dependencies. So you can really tell, like, where all the core components that I created are living. And then, you know, inside that component package, you'll create, you know, all the different components you want to share. Okay, so then, you know, once you've created a couple core packages, you'll start to create your Next.js web servers. And, you know, how you create them, no big deal. You can either use the npm command to create just a basic vanilla Next.js app, or you can create a new web server with the Sitecore JSS. So I'm not going to go into the details here of, you know, the actual web servers, because I think you guys have, you know, that's been covered quite a bit. But the idea is here that you'll just scaffold the number of web servers that you want. And then once you have that project, the next step is to add the dependency from the Workspaces root to the core components. So there's another flag for the npm command with -w to target a specific workspace, and I want to add, for example, my core components, and this will set up the right dependency in in each of the Next.js servers, you know, that you want to share your components. So one thing I wanted to call out, like, when you're working with multiple web servers, and especially if you're not necessarily going to run the, you know, the create React app or create Next.js app at the same time, you might have, you know, you might create site A at one point, and then, you know, create site B with the JSS app a second time. You know, I really recommend being aware of all your dependencies across the repo, and it's usually safer to kind of remove the kind of instructions on the dependencies that will upgrade automatically, and I just usually prefer to kind of lock it down. If you have a large package structure, it can get kind of unwieldy, but for basic solutions, you kind of want to control those pretty carefully. So, you know, it's fine to have something like a, you know, a caret, which is going to grab all the latest minors, or you might have a tilde in some places for patches, but for the main dependencies for things like Next.js, I would definitely recommend removing them and, just kind of controlling that across your, your solution pretty closely. There's definitely tools out there that will help you do this, things like Lerna and other package managers, but for the basics, you can kind of get by with doing it on your own. I'm going to show this in Vercel, but once you kind of set up this project structure, there's some specifics about Vercel that I want to call out, but we'll dive into this solution real quick. Okay, so let's just look at the solution real quick. I know we're kind of getting close to time. I'll do a quick demo, and then we can still leave a few minutes for questions. So it's a lot easier if you kind of look at, kind of an example. So I've got the basic project structure and Visual Studio Code here that we kind of already outlined. So I'm hoping it's a little bit more familiar than just looking at it, without kind of an explanation. But the main two folders of my Node.js workspaces are separated under packages. So I have two hypothetical kind of shared components that I'm going to share across multiple web servers. And then I have the websites folder where I have 1, 2, 3, 4 web servers. I have, just site one. Site one has its kind of subservice, service A. I have site 2 and then site 3. Site 1 and 2 don't use any kind of Sitecore at all. They just use, standard Next.js. And then just to make sure all my components work across JSS, I also created, website 3 where we introduce JSS Next.js. I've got one folder here in my workspace that has all of the TypeScript config. So for example, I have one file base here, and that's got all my TypeScript compiler config that I'm going to share across the whole solution. And then I've got two variants. I've got one for Next.js where I add a couple, parameters, and then I've got one for the React library, all the different React libraries. And so, for example, in the React libraries, they'll pull those in their own TS config with an extends. So I've just got extends, and then you'll use the import name here. So notice I'm not using a relative path. I'm using the scoped package name, and then the file that I'm importing. And then, you might have different, imports and includes for, each different server. That's kind of where it can diverge a little bit. The other thing I wanted to point out is that, all of the workspaces are really driven by the main root workspaces folder. And there's a lot of tasks in here because I have, 1, 2, 3, 4 web servers, and I have, 2 shared components. But for development mode, you really only need this set of one, I think it's about 9 tasks. And I've got, different tasks that I'm going to run. If I'm working on the whole thing, I can just very quickly run, npm dev, and it's going to start all my watchers and all my web servers nicely. And then when you're actually comes time to deploy to Vercel, you'll need additional commands like build for the, the real full build commands. And then if I'm working on my local with, maybe the production builds, you also need these start commands. But at a minimum, you need these dev commands for, working locally, and then build for working, with Vercel. The tasks are very similar. So I've got basically an entry point to run all my packages. I've got an entry point to run all my web servers, and then each web server has its own task inside that. And we make heavy use of the parallel and series commands. So for example, in dev mode, you're going to be basically running everything in parallel. All my web servers, all my watchers will run in parallel. But then if you think of building to Vercel, I'm going to build one project after another, or I'm going to build my packages first. So that's where we start to use the serial command. So my root is really, just a combination. My root package is really just a combination of tasks. I pull all the workspaces together, and I think we went over this pretty good. And then I have just one dev one or two dev dependencies on, you know, npm run all to run all my tasks, and then I also import the TypeScript config. So, you know, what does that look like on your local? So the one thing I did is I separated all of the web servers kind of onto their own port. And sorry, I'm trying to get rid of this Teams, this Zoom bar here. Sorry, go away bar. So when it comes time to actually like run those web servers, you know, it's pretty easy. You just run the npm run dev all command, and I get all my 4 web servers running on different ports. So as a developer, I can, you know, maybe I want to run all of them together because they create one seamless experience. And you know, it's hard to tell that we're, you know, bouncing around different sites here, but if I watch the port number here on my URL bar, you can see when I bounce across to different services and different sites, I bounce to different ports. So I've just run in sequential port, you know, 3001 here. Site 2 is running on, you know, port 3002. It's just compiling. And I think you get the idea. So, you know, from the developer perspective, it's pretty simple. You just basically run the dev command from the root, and I'll run it here again so we can kind of see, and then we'll make a change. Oh, come here. All right, so I'm gonna run my command here. It's just npm run dev, start to run. And again, if you use something like Turbo, you know, Turbo can kind of optimize this so it doesn't build dependencies. But since we have such a small structure here, I only have a couple shared components and I only have a couple web servers, you know, it's just easiest to set up that quick hierarchy and let them build. So I'm starting to run the Next.js servers here. In just a second, I should see like all my, you know, Next.js servers start up. Okay, so you can see here, I've got 3001, 3002, 3000. And I should see, you know, go back to the sites just to make sure they're up. So it just basically is compiling all the sites in the background. So I want to say, like, let's show an example real quick of working on one component across this multiple sites. So if you'll notice in the middle of the site here, I've got this one kind of component that's just a, you know, very basic, kind of like an age gate component. And if I bounce between the different sites and the different services, you'll see that I'm sharing this kind of, all the components are the same across all the sites. And what I'm going to do as a demo is I'm going to open up all the different sites in different tabs, and we're going to see how fast they update when we make a change. So I'm a developer and I'm coming in to make a change. I'm going to my component test1, which is just the test name for my, you know, reusable age component. So it's called test1 here, and I've got some, you know, functions here for handling the age change. I've got some buttons, you know, and, you know, I can show on all the websites that, you know, those websites are just pulling in that core code. They're not really redefining, you know, I won't find that button in each of my sites. So I did want to show that real quick. Let's see. So if I look at the homepage for website 1, and I'm using my test age component, I've got it right here. I'm just using test1, and I'm above, I imported it from that, you know, that shared component library. So, you know, I might have parameters that I change on a site-by-site basis, or in this case, I want to make a change to, you know, the core component. So I'm just going to make something we can see real quick. And I'm just going to say, I want to make this more of a sentence. I'm going to say increment your age instead of increment age, and decrement age. And I'm just going to provide a little bit more of a greeting that we can see. So I'm going to hit save. I just hit Control S as my kind of keyboard hotkey. And in my console, I should see the fact where it just picked up changes and recompiled the app. And there we go. So across all the sites, you know, the Vercel hot reload feature, I didn't even have to refresh the browser. As soon as I hit save, the kind of the WebSockets from Next.js noticed the change, and I'm not sure why that I had to refresh that there, but you can see I made the change across all the 3 sites with just changing a single component. And let's see, I think that's it for so that's just the basics of like how you would work locally. Does anybody have any questions before we really run out of time?
The question, probably the number one question from all the attendees, is it shared anywhere at GitHub?
No, so I'm working on that.
But it will be.
Yeah, I've got to get permission from a few different angles, but yeah, I think there's nothing proprietary about it yet. It's just an example, and like you could definitely use this as like a starting point if you chose, but I think that it definitely has value as a repo for a reference. The names in here are kind of just as an example, so chances are you could use the same structure in a different solution and kind of follow this. Some of the parts I didn't show, what I was going to shave for another time is kind of another layer on top of what you saw. In the very first version, I just was working across like local host, right? The obvious next step is to add a
Vercel.
yeah, Vercel, and also a reverse proxy. So at a lot of the Sitecore solutions we see, you've got, TLS encryption in front of your web servers. So that's the obvious next step, is to set up that. And I've already got this in the solution, but I'll save that for a different demo. But there is one thing that I want to finish up with that is real important when it comes to working with workspaces in Vercel. Like normally, if you have, Vercel and a single rendering, you just kind of you just set the root directory of your project to the front end and deploy. But because we're working with workspaces now, you have to think about like where those web servers are in relation to the workspaces. You can't just set the npm commands the same way you used to. But it's real easy in Vercel. They have all the capabilities for that. Obviously they're a big Next.js shop. It's probably not common for Sitecore people, and that's why I wanted to point it out. But they have full support for workspaces. And the idea is that all your build commands, they need to run relative to the workspace, the root of the workspace. So when you have, that monorepo, you're going to work relative to all the workspaces, all the different projects, because, I might have, all my components that I need to build at the same time. And unless you have those components on like a package registry, no, Vercel has to get those packages somehow. And it's just best to, keep everything within your workspaces config. But the secret kind of sauce is this output directory. So you can have multiple web servers in a single repository, but you still have to tell Vercel for each project which web server Next.js server you want to use, and that's this output directory here. So everybody's familiar with .next in their folders, and you just basically tell for each project. For example, I'm on website site 1. I'm just going to point that project to the output directory of website site 1.next. And if I look at site 2, it's the exact same path, except for I'm using the .next file in site 2. And then the build command is fairly easy to understand. I'm just building all the packages, so I want to build all my core components, even though I might not use all of them. It's kind of, you could be as verbose as you want here. And then I also run build site 2. You could just run npm build here, but in case your sites get kind of large, you only want to build the site that you're really going to use. So if by building all my core components and then build site 2, I can tell, Vercel not to build site 1 or site 3 if I'm, just trying to build site 2. So it took me a little time to understand that. And I just want to kind of shortcut that for everyone, if you're, when you get to that point where you're ready to deploy to Vercel. And I think that's it. We're about 10 minutes over, but thanks for sticking around. If you guys have any questions, let me know. And I will stop the sharing.
And I'm wondering if, let's say I would like to use this as a foundation and bring existing projects with Next.js and locate him under the Workspaces as a separate individual site with the idea of sharing specific components which they might have. For example, let's say if it's Sitecore related stuff, if they might have some SXA based or some something coming from SDK, let's say. So how good is that?
I mean, the main thing, if you're going to bring in an existing project, is to check your dependencies.
That was my next question, actually.
That is where all of the trouble I have had in the past. So one of the reasons I created that kind of POC to begin with is that the very first time I tried Workspaces, I tried to take an existing solution and kind of build Workspaces in from that. And it was really hard to tell what could have been wrong in that example. So I created this to kind of capture all of the kind of different ideas in a working state. And there's no reason you can't pull in additional packages. Like if you have a customer and you have multiple web servers already, or you've got a big one and you're going to create, chances are you've got, like, you might have already built the mega menu and you want to share that with another site. Refactoring that and extracting that out into a shared component is a lot more likely as you evolve into different packages. And all I can say is the best thing to do is use the most modern version of TypeScript you can. So I was using Node. I had the most success with things like Node 20, TypeScript 5.5, all the latest Next.jses. And everything seemed to work when I put it together in a kind of clean environment. And with existing customer solutions, you just want to, like, you're going to have to be looking at the dependencies of your whole workspace. So there's a command in npm, it's called npm list. You'll run that on your root workspaces, and then it'll actually tell you which versions are used in different projects. So once you copy those solutions in, that you really want to audit that dependency graph so that you're staying as close to each other as possible. The problems I ran into, and it might have been even what kind of plagued me during the demo, is that when a package gets out of sync, you can run into real issues when you're making updates. So I work on one component, and that component works on maybe 2 out of the 3 sites if one of the sites is out of sync with its dependencies. And in the perfect state, you should see no node modules in your kind of sub project. So if you do everything right, you'll see one node modules file at the root of your workspace, and none of your packages will have kind of variations. If you do end up with a mismatch where node can't deduplicate, it will try to install the package in the sub, the individual packet, the individual project. And you really kind of want to limit that as much as possible. But it might be unavoidable for certain customers. Not every site is going to upgrade at the same time. And Node does a good job of isolating it. But I definitely ran into issues where you know, components worked on one site, but not another because they had a mismatch in the, you know, version of JSS that they used, or the version of Next.js, or even TypeScript types themselves. So just keep an eye on your packages, and you got to be a lot more aware. It's a lot more work, you know, to manage those packages, but, you know, I try to, you know, explain the basics, and that's where you can kind of on your own, you know, look at the different tools that are out there for managing packages. Once you kind of get to that, you know, some enterprises have, you know, might already have those standards, and some might not, but there's a lot of tools out there that can make it a lot easier to manage those packages.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone from the audience, do you have questions?
I have a quick one. It's probably
Go for it.
a trivial one, but I was just curious. If you're sharing a component between, say, multiple websites, how did you synchronize, say, the data template, and did you like have any, I don't know, pre-commit hooks or something like that, just to make sure there was no
No. I haven't, like, it's definitely a concern, right? So, you know, I'm trying to take as much Sitecore templates and rendering templates out of it at this point, you know, just to kind of keep it basic. You know, the opportunity for sharing is still there, right? You know, there's nothing stopping you from, you know, having a consistent, you know, kind of item serialization structure. So I'm trying not to take any opinions on that, but at least here, right? But you will definitely encounter that with customers.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, the template, really, the tie to the template is going to come back to your props, you know, on your shared components. So if you're sharing, you know, the same props across components and you know, different templates, then it should be fine. You can definitely, you're not just, I sometimes I say just components, but really you can put anything in those shared components, shared projects that you need. You know, you might have a, you know, fully fleshed out service library. You might have a whole bunch of props and, you know, a context, or all, you know, all those standard React goodies that you want to share.
Thank you.
Cool.
Any more questions? If no more questions, then we can call it a day. Thank you very much, all attendees, for attending today. Thank you very much, David, for sharing these valuable insights. It's always a pleasure learning from you. And I will keep the recording and publish it as soon as I'm ready.
See ya.
Have a nice day.